Boop. All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see we have a little crowd from the library, and I'd like to welcome you all to our talk tonight, where we have a wonderful Leslie Budewitz. Is that how you pronounce your name? Just making sure I
You
have it.
know, my father had 3 brothers and they all said it differently, so I've learned to accept variations.
Okay.
And,
Well,
and what you said is just fine.
all right. Well, she is the author of Spice Shop Mysteries and Food Lover Village Mysteries, and she has a little talk for us all tonight. And then we're going to open up the meeting to questions. If someone would like to unmute themselves and just let us know that you can hear us okay, that would be wonderful once we get that part of the meeting going. Or maybe we should do that first.
Actually, I think we have to unmute them maybe, and I see Joanna.
I can hear.
We can hear.
Oh, we can hear you.
Oh, yay.
Wonderful.
You can do it yourself. Awesome. Very good. Yay. Perfect.
All right. So thank you. So it sounds like it's going all right. If there's any troubles, maybe just turn on your camera, wave a hand or something. But with that, let's get started. Welcome, welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you. So as Brianna said, I'm Leslie Budewitz or Leslie Budewitz, either one. I respond to both. I respond to pretty much anything, especially if there's food involved or books. I live in Big Fork, or actually in the woods outside of Big Fork, but I am originally from Billings. So I am a Montana girl through and through. In fact, I'm a rarity, a Montana girl married to a man who was born and raised in Montana and actually living in Montana. That's kind of an unusual thing, but it works for us. So we're living here up in the woods in northwestern Montana. As I said, I grew up in Billings, but I went to college in Seattle and then to Indiana to law school at Notre Dame. Went back to Seattle and practiced, moved back to Montana in 1992. It is, as my girl Pepper says of the Pike Place Market, my happy place. I love the market, but Montana is my happy place. And I'm really glad to be living here again. So what I wanted to do is just tell you a little bit about me and my books, and particularly about the Spice Shop series, and then hear from all of you, because I understand we've got people from the Cooking or Spice Club and also mystery readers. And obviously mine combines things just perfectly. I do need to let you know I have a bit of a scratchy throat. We're just getting over COVID. We're fine, thank you. And I might need to cough or turn my head away. Just forgive me that. It's just the nature of the beast right now. So as I said, I write the Spice Shop series. I also write the Food Lovers Village Mysteries, and they are set in fictional Jewel Bay, Montana, which is my version of Big Fork. I had to change the name of the town so that I could kill people and still live here, because it is a wonderful place to live. I started writing at 4 on my father's desk, quite literally. I did not yet understand the concept of paper. Fortunately, my parents were amused and forgiving, and they kept me well supplied in paper and pens and always encouraged my writing. It wasn't until I was in my late 30s that I started writing fiction. I started writing seriously. I went through a difficult time and decided that I needed to pursue my creative impulses. That's not uncommon. Many artists of all varieties start really pursuing things midlife because either we took a different direction, or we didn't realize how important the creative work was to us, or we got to a point in our lives where the creative work just really insisted on coming out. It took me a number of years to get an agent and to start to sell my work. I kind of have lost track of how many years it took. Along the way, I started writing short stories and was actually published in short fiction before full-length novels, which is kind of hard to believe, considering that keeping a story short is not really my strong suit, at least not in conversation, but it seems to work pretty well on the page. Along the way, I started joining other writers groups. There's a group up here in the Flathead called the Authors of the Flathead. And I joined Sisters in Crime, which is an international group that you might have heard of, and also Mystery Writers of America. And because I am a lawyer, and I've practiced for 36 years now, people started asking me questions about using the law in their fiction. They would say things like, so my character needs to get a search warrant. How does the character go about doing that? Can this character inherit from this character? Who is Miranda and why are we always warning her? So I started writing columns in newsletters for writers, answering writers' questions about the law. And eventually I met a man who had written a book of questions and answers for writers on medicine and forensics because he is a medical doctor. And I thought that was really great. And he helped me put together an idea and pitch an idea for a book of my columns, which became a book called Books, Crooks, and Counselors, How to Write Accurately About Criminal Law and Courtroom Procedure. And that was published in 2011. It won the Agatha Award for Best Nonfiction, which was very exciting. But I realized I wasn't through telling my own stories. I had kind of taken a break from writing fiction. At that point, I had some short stories published, but that was it. I'd kind of taken a break, but I realized I wasn't through writing mysteries. I wanted to write my own stories as much as I wanted to help other writers get the facts about the law right in their manuscripts. And so I started writing cozy mystery. And cozy mystery is the kind of thing we're talking about, the Spice Shop series, but also many other books. I describe them as the descendants of Agatha Christie or Jessica Fletcher with recipes. Many people first read either Agatha Christie or they watched Jessica Fletcher, or they discovered the cozy through the books written by Diane Mott Davidson, which are set in Evergreen, Colorado, and feature a caterer named Goldie Bear. And they're really terrific. That unfortunately, Diane, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, because I think it's great for her. She's retired now and she's not writing, but it's unfortunate for us, the readers who love her work, because it was so much fun. That's the vein I'm writing in. I started by writing the Food Lovers Village mysteries, which, as I said, are set in a fictional version of Big Fork. If any of you have been up here, you won't be fooled. It's very clearly based on this little village, and that's great. And the villagers have been just wonderfully supportive of me. It truly is a cozy town. Part of the fun, of course, is that people don't expect a cozy town in northwestern Montana. They expect rugged terrain and mountains and lakes and rivers and hunting and fishing, and they don't expect great restaurants and a village theater and a town full of art galleries and all the other hallmarks of the cozy town. But we really do have it. And of course, you've got it too in a slightly larger community. And we have aspects of that all over the state. And so part of the fun for me with the Food Lovers Village mysteries is introducing people to a part of Montana that they don't expect. The first one is called Death al dente, or Murder Not Quite Well Done. Pasta, murder, and the search for the perfect huckleberry chocolate. That came out in August of 2013, and it won the Agatha Award, excuse me. It won the Agatha Award for Best First Novel, and that's the teapot you can see over my left shoulder. The Agatha Awards are given by a convention called Malice Domestic, which celebrates the traditional mystery. They are given with the blessing of the estate of Dame Agatha. Her family controls her estate and her image and name very carefully, but they do give their blessing through the Agatha. And the teapot, you can see, has this fun little tag on it that is the tea bag tag, and it's got a skull on it. It's kind of hard to see backwards, or maybe you're looking forwards and I'm the one looking backwards. Anyway, it's great fun. And there are two more teapots downstairs, the nonfiction one that I mentioned, and also in 2018, my historical short story, All God's Sparrows, featuring the real life historical figure, Stagecoach Mary Fields, whom some of you have known of, I'm sure. That won the 2018 Agatha Award for Best Short Story. That teapot is white with red blood spatter, which is just exceptionally cool and fun. So about 2 years in and 2 books into writing the Food Lovers Village Mysteries, I decided to revisit Seattle, where I had gone to college and worked as a young adult, worked for several years as a lawyer downtown. I decided to revisit it on the page and start a second series called the Seattle Spice Shop Mysteries. One of the first things I fell in love with as an 18-year-old college freshman at Seattle University was the Pike Place Market. And I'm sure many of you have been there. When I moved out to Seattle in 1977, it was only a few years past the voters initiative that saved the market from what was then called urban removal. There were people who had thought that the market was old and run down, which it was, and that it needed to be torn down and replaced with something different. Well, the voters disagreed after a lengthy, years-long campaign by residents, architects, farmers, produce sellers, other people who worked and made their living in the market. And they saved it. And they did it through a bond initiative. It became a kind of a city within a city, a public development authority, which is an arm of the city, actually owns it. It ultimately became the first, excuse me, mixed use project, meaning both residential and commercial in the country, to be listed on the National Historic Register. It was founded in 1907. I think the earliest building dates back to about 1909 or 1910. And with one notable exception, well, a couple of exceptions, most of the buildings were built by the 30s. There is one much more recent one that was just opened a few years ago that replaced a building that had burned in the 1970s. So anyway, as a result of this voter initiative, systems were upgraded, electric, sewer, and water, and all of that. But the history remained. The voters were insistent on that. And so we've still got the cobblestone streets, and we've still got the nooks and crannies in the back alleys, and the Victorian capitals, and all the architecture that makes the market such an interesting place. So there is a spice shop in the market proper called Market Spice. It's right behind where the Pike Place Fish is, where the men throw the fish. There's a second spice shop down on Western Avenue called World Spice Merchants. And when I was a college kid and going to the market, what I would do is I would walk in at the main entrance, get a slice of pizza from De Laurentiis. I would stand in front of the newsstand, hands off until the pizza was gone, and browse with my eyes. Then maybe I would glimpse through a magazine or two, but only if my hands were clean. Then I would walk down to the spice shop, get a cup of tea, and start sniffing and learning about the spices. Eventually, I would wander around a little bit more and buy myself a treat. Later, when I was working downtown, I often went to the market for lunch, usually at least once a week, but I also did a lot of my grocery shopping there. If you've been to the market in more recent years, you've seen that it has changed. It has become a little bit more tourist oriented. And a big part of that is that grocery shopping has changed. You know, we can buy a lot more interesting things in our neighborhood groceries, even in small cities like Bozeman and small towns like Big Fork, than we used to be able to do. And that's certainly true in Seattle. And so not as many people do their regular grocery shopping there, but they still know that's the best place to buy fresh salmon and fresh crab and the best fresh spices in the city. A lot of other wonderful things too. There's something like 200 stores with doors, as the merchants call them, 200 farm stalls and produce stands, a couple hundred craft tables, more than 100 restaurants, and then several hundred people actually live in the market, many of them in single room occupancy or other small apartments, most of them low income. And that goes back to the history and and long traditions of the market, people always did live there in the upper floors. So it's a really fascinating place. And I often say that I made it my mission as an 18-year-old to eat my way through the market. And I'll never be done because the market's always changing. And of course, that's a big part of its charm. I decided to set a cozy series there because it is a city within a city. Most of these lighter mysteries, what I'm calling the cozy, are set in smaller towns, but they don't have to be. My friend Cleo Coyle writes a series set in Greenwich Village in New York called The Coffee House Mysteries. And they center around the village coffee house and involve the coffee, both the community, the neighbors there in that part of Greenwich Village, but also the coffee community within Greater New York. And so I've done something similar with my series where we have a lot of action in the market itself, but then we also go outside the market to deliver spices, to call on a customer, to question someone who might have information about a murder. It's been a lot of fun to write about the market because, as I said, it's a place I really love. And I usually get back there once a year, right about the time that a new book comes out. Obviously, I have not been there this year, haven't been there since June of 2019. But my best friend from college still lives in Seattle, and she's even more of a foodie than I am, and a great cook. And she and her husband have been wonderful resources and ground truthers and researchers for me. In fact, when I was there in June of 2019, the fourth Spice Shop book, Chai Another Day, had just come out, and I did a couple of events there at a bookstore. And then I actually signed at World Spice, and that was a lot of fun. But my friend and her daughter, who is 20 now, went on a research trip with me. We went to a part of the city that I remembered, but not a neighborhood either of them knew. And we drove around and we drank too much coffee and we wandered through the city library and the community center. And all that ended up being very important to the solace of bay leaves. If any of you have gotten to the fifth book in the series, the one that just came out in October, it's right over my shoulder here. I'll bring it forward and show you the cover. This is the fifth book, The Solace of Bay Leaves. Much of the action takes place in a neighborhood called Montlake, which is between Capitol Hill and the University of Washington. And that probably could not have come to life the way it did if Lita and Celia and I had not walked around those neighborhood streets and gone into the community center and seen what was there and realized how close it was to the wetlands and some of the other places that are settings for the story itself. So, as I said, there are 5 in the series so far. I think that you have read Guilty as Cinnamon, which is the second, and maybe Killing Time, which is the third. I don't remember exactly what Carmen told me for what books you were reading.
Yes,
but I'm happy to listen to your questions and answer any questions I can, and just hear your thoughts about spices and books and what makes a mystery fun.
Yeah, you were correct. Killing Time and Guilty as Cinnamon, those were the 2 that I could get my hands on. And then I realized that Guilty as Cinnamon was the second one in the series, but I think they can be read separately.
Oh, very definitely. They're intended that way. Now, I will say with the Food Lovers Village series, which is the Montana series, each book stands alone, of course. But in those, my main character runs a local foods market in the heart of the village of Jewel Bay. And while each book stands alone, there is also a mystery that runs through the first 3. And so they don't have to be read in order, but I think they're probably a little more fun if you do. With these, I didn't have a story that runs through, so you can read them kind of out of of order if you like. I am not a person who feels compelled to read a book or read a series in order, but some people do, and I certainly understand that.
So I'm wondering if the participants feel comfortable unmuting themselves and maybe even on doing the camera too. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'd love to see your faces. I love readers.
Let me know if you guys can do that or if I have to do it. Let me see. Would anyone pipe up and see if they can do it or if we have to unmute you?
So there's Brianna.
No, we can unmute ourselves.
Oh, great. Do you guys feel comfortable unmuting and doing the video or maybe not? I don't know. I think it'd be nice to see everybody.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, yay. Hi.
Hi. I guess I don't have any specific questions yet. I kind of wanted to listen and see what other people were doing. You answered one of my questions. I wanted to know how you got into writing and if it was, when you were younger or when you said that it was more towards middle age. And I always think that's so interesting when people shift gears in the middle and maybe you've done something else your whole life, but then let that creativity free. And it's inspiring. Yeah. So thank you for telling us about that.
Oh, good, good. I will say that I always wrote in some form. I wrote poetry and I wrote journals and I wrote lots of legal briefs, which involve a certain amount of creativity. But I didn't think I could actually write fiction because I had this silly idea that if you were going to write a story, you had to know how it turned out before you started. And that just, it isn't true. You can figure it out as you go along. Now, the irony is that because I am a mystery writer, I generally do figure out the plots before I write, but not all of it. And sometimes they change. In Guilty as Cinnamon, I didn't actually know who the killer was until a good way into the first draft. But because not everybody might have read it, we're not going to, no spoilers here. But I actually thought the solution was quite wonderful. So I hope you think so too.
I'm all the way through Guilty as Cinnamon, and I did like the ending of that one. I haven't quite gotten the end of the Killing Time yet.
Killing Time does something a little bit different. It goes back and deals with a cold case, a murder that happened many years ago. And so for each book, I like to set myself a challenge. And that was my challenge for Killing Time. I don't remember what the challenge for Guilty as Cinnamon was. Maybe it was getting all the way through it. I was still fairly new writing then.
When I first met you in 2018, I think the title that stuck with me the most, and I have not read the book, but I for sure will, As the Christmas Cookie Crumbles. I mean,
oh yeah, that one is, you can see part of the poster of that over my shoulder here. Oh, that is the 5th in the Food Lovers Village Mysteries. And people are often interested in titles, so why don't I just talk about titles for a moment?
Sure.
So with the Village series, each of the titles has to make some sort of reference to the festival or holiday involved, but it also has to have some kind of reference to food and some word that suggests that it's a mystery. So those were really challenging. Death al Dente was probably the 3rd title that we had. Let's see, which one came after that? Crime Rib. Oh, Crime Rib is the 2nd in that series. That was not my working title, but I absolutely love it. It's just either perfectly stupid or stupidly perfect, depending on how you look at it. Since it's murder at a steak grill-off and a summer arts festival. I love that one. Butter Off Dead, Murder at a Food Lovers Film Festival. Butter, movies, butter, popcorn. You see how my mind works. That one actually my agent came up with. Then Trouble at the Jam Fest, the publisher came up with. Cookie was my first and so far my only Christmas book, but I hope to be writing another one shortly. And usually I have a working title as I'm writing. But with that one, it was just Food Lovers Village #5. And I could not come up with a title. But I was getting close to having to turn the book in. And I knew I couldn't turn it in as FLV #5. That wasn't going to work. So I said, as the Christmas cookie crumbles, and you can change it. And they all said, no, 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 that's perfect. And it's one of my favorite titles. With the Spice Shop series, the spice is so interwoven into the story that the spice really can't change. And so if the title needs to change, then we've got a problem. And in fact, we did change Killing Time. I don't remember what it was originally, but Killing Time is actually just perfect for it. The 5th book in that series, the new one, The Solace of Bay Leaves, that title comes from a comment that Pepper, the spice shop owner, makes. She said that when her life fell apart at 40, she never expected to find solace in bay leaves, meaning she didn't anticipate that buying the spice shop, which was kind of a wild hair thing to do, would turn out to be one of the best decisions she ever made. And so it's not the kind of humorous wordplay of some of the other titles, but it really fits, and I hope you like it too.
Nice.
I'm getting a little message that says my internet connection might be a little unstable, and so I think what happens then is that you can hear me, but you might not see me. Hopefully that won't be a problem.
We
just lost Kyla, or she went back to mute.
Yeah. I think we can still see you right now. At least
You
I
can still see her. Okay.
But the screen went
Great.
smaller.
Great.
So I don't know. But yeah, it's good so far.
What seems to be happening is the audio is fine and the video is just taking some time to catch up. Which I actually had a question for you, if you don't mind.
You bet.
You said you don't always have a title or even an ending planned when you start a book. What is usually kind of the foundation that you start with, or does it vary between your novels?
So it does vary. Each book teaches me how to write it. I almost always know the very end. What I don't necessarily know is who the killer is, but I figure that out as I'm planning. I am what I call a planner. There are people who are planners or outliners on the one side, and the other is some people call themselves pantsers, meaning they write by the seat of their pants. I said that once in a talk to writers, and there were a couple of people who hadn't heard the term yet. And some lovely man raised his hand and said, "What do you mean by panther?" And so I have to explain pantser, writing by the seat of your pants, not panther as in black cat. Or other people who write that way describe themselves as organic writers. And that's a wonderful way to put it, meaning they let things develop. I let them develop too, but I do it in my planning and outlining stage. And that just works best for me. Because I'm writing a series, I always know the main setting. I don't necessarily know where in the city Pepper is going to go, what neighborhood is going to be important. But I know the market, and I know that a lot of the story is going to happen there. I know where she lives. And I know her staff, although that has changed. Her staff has changed a little bit. If you've read Guilty as Cinnamon, you know one person kind of went up in flames. And that's not a spoiler, at least not, I hope it isn't. And then we have a couple of new cast members in Killing Time. But I usually know the basic outline. There are a couple of books where I really struggled with that, and I didn't know about halfway through what was going to happen for the next portion of the book. And when that happens, it turns out that part of my process is write half the book, freak out, and then write the second half. And so the freak out involves me figuring out what's the emotional core. What is really driving the killer? Because, you know, the killer is still active. We've had the murder at the beginning, but the killer is still doing things to try to stay undetected and to frustrate Pepper and the detectives. Of course, Pepper herself frustrates the detectives a bit, especially Detective Tracy. But then we also have Pepper's motive for investigating, what my good friend Ramona Long referred to as the VGR, the very good reason. Because most of us, face it, we would call 911 and hope to never have to be involved again. But these women who run Cozy Mysteries, they are a little more curious types. But they've got to have a good reason. They've got to have a good motivation. And so there's always some sort of central emotional reason for their involvement. Does that answer your question, Brianna?
Yes, thank you so much.
About process? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always different. It's always different.
So what I really appreciate and like about the book, that you always have the cast in the front, like the names and who they are, because sometimes if that doesn't happen, at least for me, and you start reading a book and like you get lost as to who's who and what, at least there you can go back and go like, oh yeah, this is the new sales clerk or whatever. If you're in the middle of the book and go like, well, I can't remember who is this again, and I really appreciate this. I mean, that's great.
So that's in every book except Death Al Dente, the first of the Village series. I didn't do that then, but my editor let me do that with the second and later books. And so I wrote the Spy Shop books with that device as well. It's a golden age device that goes back to many of the writers of the 30s. They used that. For me, it's fun, not only as a way to keep you engaged, because I'm incapable of writing small, tight casts of characters, and admire writers who can do that, who can write a whole book with 5 people. I could never do that. I can't write a scene with 5 people. But also, it's another way to tell the story. It's another element of the story, just the way in the Spy Shop series, the epigraphs add to the story, and in both series, the recipes. To me, they're storytelling. They're not just another recipe. And so I'm curious, I know some of you are cooks. Have you gotten to try any of the recipes yet, and how'd they work out for you?
So I've tried a couple of them, and they've worked pretty well. There was one, I kind of overcooked the quiche a little bit. So next time we'll do better. But I do love having the recipes in the back, because my husband and I were foodies. We drink wine. I cook a ton. So those are fun to tie back in with the story. And so I've read all of the books, and it was actually, and I love them. It was through the library's Spice Club and with the, yes, yay. And I think it was, what was it? I think the chai one was the first one. And so once I read that, and the minute I knew it was set in Seattle, I was hooked, because we lived in Seattle for a good number of years before moving back. And so we're in Bozeman now, but so everything about Seattle, I love reading about, because it brings back memories for me. Yeah. And, of things that we used to do in the market, and, in the different neighborhoods. And like, I hadn't been back to Montlake. I think the first time was when I was in college, for the Husky football games. And really hadn't
right across the bridge.
Yeah, I hadn't gone into that neighborhood, too often after that, because there's, obviously plenty more of Seattle. So it was fun to just kind of put myself back in that spot.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm hooked.
So I have to tell you, since you know Montlake, there's a reference early on in The Solace of Bay Leaves, to the Montlake Bridge. And I loved the bridge. It's a very cool, Gothic, sort of creaky old drawbridge. It's quite wonderful. And I wasn't sure, it didn't belong. It didn't belong in the story. And I kept telling myself, Leslie, that doesn't belong. You have to take it out. And finally, I just decided, no, leave it in, take it out later. And then, as you know, Julie, it turns out to be pretty important near the end. And so my subconscious mind knew that it needed to be there, and I had no idea that level of detail of how it was going to come into play later on. Of course, it's a very small but important piece later on. And so, you know, we have to learn to as writers to trust our own instincts. Tell me more about your Spice Club.
Okay, so with the way the year has been going, I mean, normally we do programs in person, and I took over the department about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, and I'm a foodie too, so yay. Um, and I have a book club, and then I have a cooking club privately, not I mean, not I have, I'm part of. And so when I mean, we had closed down the library in March, and we didn't open back up until, oh gosh, I can't even remember when we opened up for curbside. Then we opened up all the way except programming, and now we're back to curbside due to the pandemic. And
Mhm.
so the whole programming has gone out the window the way we normally do programming. So we tried finding ways of engaging patrons in a different way instead of just, I mean, you know, but just giving out books or DVDs. Um, so we started with a craft bag, actually. So we do a monthly craft bag, and that was super popular. And then we decided, since I like spices and food and stuff, so we did this spice club, and then we tied your books in with it. And I mean, I don't know if it was a little too ambitious or too weird for people, I'm not sure, but I just thought it was a great idea. And since we had been talking a long time already about you coming to Bozeman, and so now that's not going to happen really anytime soon. So this was a great way of doing that. So we do let's see, so we did September, October, and November, and 2 spice bags per month. And they come with a spice, they come with a recipe, they come with a newsletter that has all the details about the history of the spice. Um, and yeah, I think it turned out pretty well so far. Those of you who are participating, would you want to chime in? Julie, it sounds like you're part of it. Kyla?
There's
Yeah,
Tyler again.
I've been loving
Yeah.
it. It's been awesome.
Sandra?
I always love to cook, and I use a ton of spices. I'm a pretty adventurous cook in general, if I do say so myself. But it was really fun to be sort of part of something, and it was awesome that it was free. That was really fun, because usually you can spend an arm and a leg on spices and stuff, but it was really nice that you guys provided it, and then with a recipe to go along with it. And I loved reading the newsletters, and the podcasts were really fun too, because it just gave this kind of holistic experience. I don't know if Carmen mentioned, there were also recommended podcasts in there that had like history of the spice and how
wow.
that fits in with literature and
Yeah.
world history relating to that spice. And then to go from there and also be learning about pepper, and pepper would sometimes touch on history. And there are those little vignettes at the beginning of each of your chapters that have a little fun fact. And it was just, I don't know, I've learned a lot, and it's been fun, and it's given me something to do and not go entirely insane this fall. So yeah, thank you very much.
Isn't spice just fascinating? It's got such history to it that goes beyond food to the history of the age of exploration. Some of it's not so positive when we think about colonization and some of the downside. But there's just so much interesting history to it.
Sandra and Julie, do you want to chime in?
Well, that's how I got involved. I am not a food person at all. I'm not a spice person at all. And when I saw that being advertised, so to speak, in the public library newsletter, I was like, oh, well, I'd like to stretch a little bit into this. I do not read mysteries. I mean, that's a genre I would like be the last person to read a mystery. I picked up Chai Another Day because I've been looking for the perfect chai recipe. I now make your chai recipe every morning for my chai with green tea. I have to admit, I'm a green tea drinker.
Green tea's fine.
And so I use green tea instead of the awesome, Indian tea. But I'm hooked. I read all 5 spice books like that, like almost in 24 hours because I couldn't put it down. And actually, Leslie, I met you when I lived on Foothills Road in the Flathead because Don, I used to go to him as my natural path. But
Sandra, I don't remember that, but I will definitely mention him. I can see your name. Okay. I will definitely mention that to him.
So now I'm in Bozeman.
Downstairs.
Yeah. So anyways, I will eventually read the food ones because of course I know big books so well. But I will but I am now, like, I actually went to our spice shop in Bozeman, never having gone there before, to explore spices because I was so excited about what Pepper was keeping and the smells and everything else. So I went down to Bozeman and bought the spices for the chai. And now it's like, I'm exploring spices and everything. It's just so fun. I just really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the tea.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
That's really great. Carmen, look what you did.
I know. Like, you guys are just, I mean, I'm floored. I'm super happy. You guys just made my night.
Well, I was so glad to read your books. I mean, that was just really fun to have a book, books to read during the fall, besides all the ones I'm reading that are nonfiction. It was fun to pick up something that was
Every so often you need a little break from more serious things, right? And that's part of my pitch for the cozy mystery.
Yeah, I'm excited for more. Actually.
Well, I hope that there will be more Spice Shop books. I have a proposal into the publisher, but we don't have an offer yet, so cross your fingers.
All right. Thank you very much. Oh, the library and Leslie.
Established in the Middle Ages, precariously on the edge of a cliff.
Does somebody have any background noise by any chance? I'm not sure. Something,
Works together like a big
something, a newscast is going. Oh, there we go. That's good. Okay. All good. Julie, did you want to pipe in?
Actually, I think that background noise was me.
Oh, that's okay.
My husband's watching the Rick Steves program on one of our computers while I'm doing
on the
this.
Swiss Alps?
Yes.
We wanted to watch that, but I'm here with you instead.
I know, exactly.
Let's see if we can rerun him anytime.
Exactly. So we've taken a lot of his trips, and so it's like anytime, there's kind of new things, it's like, oh, we have to watch this. So that's what the noise is. Sorry about that. But my question is, so when you put in your proposals for the stories and so forth, do you give yourself a set length of time to write the story? Or is it a little more?
This is going to sound flip, but the absolute truth is how long it takes me to write the book is how long the contract gives me. I have written one in as little as 3 months and as long as 11 months. It just depends on what I've got to do. I'm not practicing law much anymore. And so I treat writing as my full-time job. Most of the time, except for the last couple of weeks, I am writing by 8:30 and I write until 12:30 or 1, and then take a little lunch break and then spend the afternoon doing promotional things and, writing a newsletter, updating the website. Well, the website's a little outdated right now. That sort of thing. I can only write for 3 or 4 hours a day. And as I said, we've been sick. So the last couple of weeks I wasn't writing. It was really a thrill to get back to it this morning. Really quite a delight, actually.
Right.
Yeah. So I would, to Carmen, it's like whenever this pandemic thing gets under control and we can move forward. I have enjoyed the Spice series and looking forward to when we can actually get together and meet in the library and talk about
Oh.
recipes and books and,
Oh, for sure.
you
Yes.
know,
Oh,
yeah,
anytime.
it's nice to connect over stuff like this.
Yeah.
So,
And
and
I mean,
especially,
it's a
you know,
wonderful
with Leslie here.
substitute, but it's not quite the same as being together with people, is it? But I
Right.
am really grateful that we do have these opportunities to connect this way.
Yeah. So this was one way to ease into like a cooking club at the library too. So stay tuned. It's coming,
Very
I mean,
cool.
not anytime soon, but it, you know, that's one of my, or cooking classes or something along those lines. I had a question. Let's see if I can find my question. Oh, so I've also lived in at Fort Lewis at the military the Army base. And so we lived in Tumwater actually. So I'm like super psyched that Tumwater was mentioned in there. Um, and so you mentioned at the market, and you said something about the sanitary market. Is that what you called it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever realized that there's something different.
So each of the buildings in the market has its own history and its own names. And the
Oh.
sanitary market is it. Have you been to the market, Carmen?
Oh yeah, numerous times.
Okay. So when you walk in from First Avenue, over on the left is De Laurentiis and the newsstand and the old trolley, that's the information booth. And
Yeah.
on the right, on the corner, is a flower stand. And then you walk down to Pike Place, where Pike Place makes that L-shaped turn. It's a short street, and then it turns to head north. The second building in is the old sanitary market. And my understanding of the name is that back in the 20s, animals were all over the place. But the sanitary market was advertised that way because they wanted you to know animals did not go into that building. And so you could get your cheese and your dairy products there, and there were no animals and no dirt and no feces on the floor and that sort of thing. That's my understanding of it. I think there's probably some truth to it. Not long ago, I talked to a reader in another part of the country, and I've forgotten where, who referred to a building and said it was called the Sanitary Bakery, and she didn't know why. And my guess was that the origin was similar to that of the sanitary market in the Pike Place market.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Thank you.
Odd little details.
Right.
Fun little details.
Yep. That's true.
So I do have a question about why you chose to start writing cozy mysteries. I'm sure as a lawyer, you might have seen some grittier stuff in real life. What drew you to do, it's not that they're lighter always, I mean, they're still murder, but a little bit more warm-hearted storytelling.
Warm-hearted, that's a great term for them. Thank you. I often refer to them as lighthearted, but warm-hearted is even better. Yes, you're right. I have seen a fair amount of the gritty side, and I'd had enough of it. And I wasn't really interested in writing about lawyers. If you write it's not that they're not wonderful people, but I didn't really want to write a legal thriller. You've got to be really, I don't know, kind of clever to pull off some of those twists and turns. And not that these aren't perfectly clever in a different way. I just didn't really feel drawn to write about that sort of thing. The cozy I like because to me, it's about community. And that's ultimately, I think, what these books are about. You know, you've got the amateur investigation paralleling the official investigation. Murder disrupts the social order of the community. And the job of the official investigators is to figure out what happened and to bring someone to justice through the justice system. And the job of our amateur sleuth, she helps. She figures that out. In fact, very often she's the one who puts all the pieces together because she's involved in the community. She sees the connection between people. She sees things that maybe a detective who is knowledgeable but not part of the community in the same way as she is, that he doesn't see it quite the same way she does. She can ask questions. She can probe things that maybe an official investigator can't, because people don't necessarily want to be as forthcoming. One of my examples of what the amateur sleuth can do compared to the professional sleuth comes from my friend Kate Carlisle's Bookbinder mystery series. And her character is a bookbinder. She restores books. Excuse me. She knows the history of these old books. And so she knows that the value of, say, and I'm making this up, a 1932 copy of The Secret Garden isn't just what it would get on eBay. It's what it means emotionally to the person who originally collected that book, who got it from her grandmother and then it was stolen and she's stolen it back, or whatever the plot might be. The value goes far beyond the monetary value of the thing itself. And so our amateur sleuth can see those things in a way that our professional detectives might not. And so ultimately what she's doing is restoring the social fabric of the community. And that's why I like the books. That's why I enjoy writing them, why I enjoy talking about them. I read other things, but, and in fact, I write other things too, but the cozy is really where my heart is. I just today did the cover reveal for my spring 2013 book, which is called Bitterroot Lake. And the cover is, it's not on my website yet because I haven't gotten it up there. It's on a website called Bolo Books, BOLO, be on the lookout for books, .com. And it's also on my Facebook author page. It's really a very beautiful cover of a historic lodge on a lake in northwestern Montana. And it's a suspense novel rather than cozy mystery, but it's also, you know, it's not a graphic or anything like that. And I'm not really into the blood and gore. I will say it's written under a different name. It's written as Alicia Beckman, which is my other side, I guess. The publisher thought that for a slightly different kind of book, we needed a different name, and it honors my mother and my grandmother. So it's kind of fun. But I do love the cozies, and I'm so glad that you do too.
Yeah.
Great.
The other thing I like is Pepper as a character. I felt like it was great having a female character, and as much of her inside her head, philosophical outlooks on life were so fun to read. Yeah. So
Thanks.
I'm wondering if that's part of you coming out, as far as, you know, because how else do you, you know, think of, how else do you put that into somebody else's head, kind of thing? But I really,
yeah, she is in that sense a lot like me. She speaks for me in a lot of ways, as does Erin in the other series, even though they're very different women. Erin has a little bit of my own story in that she grew up in Montana, left and came back, and writing her is a fun opportunity to explore that experience, which, as you all know, is a common one, through the eyes of a much younger woman. Pepper was born and raised in Seattle, but she grew up in this Catholic peace and justice community. I didn't, although I grew up Catholic. I discovered that community in college and later, and so I know those worlds. The reviewer for Library Journal described Pepper as a mature, introspective sleuth, and I like that a lot. I think that'll be the catchphrase on future book covers. I like that review a lot. You know, she's not a 20-something running around in 2 high heels and 2 short skirts. She's mature most of the time.
Yeah, I
So
wish.
what else?
I was going to say, I wish that I would have paid more attention to the spice shops at the market when I was at the market. I mean, I haven't been there in a while because I've lived here for a long time. But that seems like a cool thing to buy, like a spice shop, and then run the spice shop, especially if it has tea as well. I mean, I think that's just the best. I should have made myself a cup of tea, but I'm holed up in my bedroom, so it's not really gonna work.
I'm
But
envious of Julie's glass of wine. I'll be having one
I
shortly.
know, I saw that. I was like, this is the best idea. I should have thought about that, inviting everybody to have a drink ready, but I didn't think about that. Yeah, I just think, maybe my next career will be buying a spice/tea shop. I mean, I think that would be great.
If nothing else, you can write about them.
Yeah, I
For
don't
me,
know.
it's a whole level of wish fulfillment. I get to have a different career with every book.
That's true. Yeah, I guess that's true. I personally don't feel very creative per se. So I'm not
If you
sure.
made that quilt that's hanging behind you, then you are creative.
I did not. I won that quilt. Yeah. That was a stroke of luck. It's a really nice quilt. Thank you. But no, I did not make that quilt.
Leslie,
Hi,
I have a question. And
Yes.
thank you so much, Carmen and Brianna, for putting this together and everything. And I've enjoyed so much your talk tonight. And your titles are just so captivating to me. And I love to hear about how you've blended your professional career as a lawyer and all the places and experiences you've had. And since you say you were originally in Billings and stuff, were you ever connected to the writer's voice? Because years ago when I was there, I was part of that. And I'm wondering if that's something of interest to you to actually share all of these experiences you've shared tonight and stuff in a setting where those of us that do dabble in writing ourselves can share the craft and the process with you.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad that you've enjoyed the books and being here this evening. I certainly have. The Writer's Voice was founded long after I left Billings. I grew up there, but I left in 1977 after I finished high school at Billings Central, although my mother continued to live there until 2009. And so I was back there regularly. I haven't been back there in a couple of years now. But I do still have very good friends in Billings and love the city a lot. And I would love to someday do something with The Voice. I am a past president of a national organization, actually an international organization called Sisters in Crime, which is now about 4,000 sisters and brothers, most of them writers or aspiring writers. Some are readers, librarians, agents, editors. And it is aimed, its purpose is to promote the professional development and advancement of primarily women crime writers. It was founded in 1986 by Sarah Paretsky and others. And one of the great professional achievements and pleasures of my life was interviewing Sarah on the occasion of Sisters' 30th anniversary a few years ago. I went to Chicago when the American Library Association meeting was there and helped out with the Sisters booth and spent some time with Sarah, who is an absolute kick in the pants. She's just an absolutely fabulous woman, as well as an amazing writer. And through Sisters in Crime, although perhaps even before that, I've definitely been an advocate for other writers. And I am also now on the National Board of Mystery Writers of America. And just finishing my first 2-year term, and I'll serve another 2-year term as an at-large member. My feeling there is that I represent those of us who sit alone at home in our houses in the woods, far from other writers, and don't have in-person groups. I think I speak for many of those people. And what What do we need from a group? What kind of information do we need? What kind of classes? What kind of written materials? What kind of networking can we do from the extra room in our houses, where we don't have the opportunity to go to a different library every night of the week for 6 months within 50 miles, like my friends in Boston or LA might have. So how do we what benefits can we provide writers as they're learning? What promotional opportunities can we provide? I do teach a little bit. Just a couple of days ago, I taught a class for a Sisters in Crime chapter on building character. And I do another one on common mistakes writers make about the law, drawing on that career and on the nonfiction book I mentioned. So I love working with other writers. And I'm sorry I'm so far away from The Voice, because I do hear that it's a wonderful organization, but I have a book circulating among publishers right now that is set in Billings, and hopefully it will sell and be published, and I will get to go to Billings and celebrate the launch of that. That's a ways down the line yet. That one's still making the rounds of publishing houses.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Hi, Peggy.
Hi. This is Peggy, and I'm joining you from Seattle.
Oh,
And I've actually come to see you in Seattle a couple of times when you were here.
at
And
Third Place?
at Third Place Books up at Lake Forest Park. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I also have, I'm very interested in this spice group. I saw this on your, I get your emails, and I saw it on your email. And I know that I'm in Seattle, but as I'm thinking, as long as we are socially distancing, I would be interested to hear if you're having another spice group at some point. I'd love to join that. And this has been really fun.
So Carmen, I think that's a question for you, whether an out of towner can join the fun.
I don't see why not. I mean, we called this Spice Up Your Fall, so we're only going to do it September, October, November. But I do think we're going to do it again next fall. And all the Spice Club newsletters that I was referring to earlier, they're all on our website. So if you want to send me an email or just check our website, bozemanlibrary.org, all the information is there. And you can peruse the newsletters as you would like. Does that answer?
Thank you. Yeah. I will do that. I'll check on that. And Leslie, I'll look forward to next time you can come to Seattle.
Thank you, Peggy. I just love that bookstore. Third Place Books is,
Yes.
It's got 3 locations, and the one that Peggy and I frequent is up in the north end of the city. It's in an area called Lake Forest Park. It's just a really terrific bookstore, and the people there have been so warm and welcoming to me. I just love the reading community that you've all created there in that bookstore. It's an old Puget consumer grocery store, and the people who own the bookstores have set them up in, I think there's 3 now, Ravenna and Seward Park, in old Puget consumers grocery stores. And I'd love to go to the one in Seward Park, because that was the area I lived in when I last lived in Seattle, and that was my grocery store. But I haven't gotten to speak there yet. They keep sending me north, which is wonderful because it's a fun store.
Great.
So thank you for joining us tonight. That's really sweet. It's really sweet. What she's referring to as my emails is my email newsletter. And you can sign up for that at lesliebudewitz.com. And subscribers get a free download for a short story. Right now, it's a Food Lovers Village short story, so that will change at some point soon. but that's a good way to get a taste of my other series if you haven't read it yet.
Are there any other questions? Or thoughts, comments, anybody?
I just wanted to say that I really enjoy the Spice Shop Mysteries, and I have read all of those, and I am a cozy fan way back. That's just about all I read in terms of mystery.
That's great. Thank you. And if any of you need recommendations for other cozy mysteries, I know that Carmen and the staff are all great at Reader's Advisory, but I'll give you one other resource, and that is a blog called mysteryloverskitchen.com. And there are 13 mystery writers, all of us either American or Canadian, writing for the American market, American and Canadian market, because my books are sold in both countries as well. And we all write the cozy mysteries, all with a strong food theme in them. I mentioned earlier Cleo Coyle and the Coffee House Mysteries. She and I alternate on Tuesdays. And so what we do on when it's our post, for me, it's the first, third, and fifth Tuesday, is I write a little story about a recipe, then I give you the recipe, pictures on how to make it. And then when there's a new book, sometimes we do giveaways. We have guests on Sundays. It's mysteryloverskitchen.com. There's no punctuation in that because the computer doesn't like punctuation in addresses like that. I mentioned Cleo. There's also Krista Davis. The late Sheila Connolly was a member for years and a dear friend of all of us. Daryl Gerber. Right now I'm drawing a blank on who else is part of the group, but there's 13 of us and a different recipe and a different story every day. And then, as I said, we have guests on Sundays. So it's a lot of fun.
So what do you mean by
I'm probably the one who pays most attention to spices, though.
Can you tell what you mean by guests? Like you have interviews, or what do you mean?
They are other writers for the most part, but not always. I have had owners of a couple of spice shops. The owner of World Spice has come on and been a guest of ours, providing an illustrated recipe. The owner of Red Stick Spice in Baton Rouge has been my guest. A couple of other cookbook writers have been guests, but for the most part, they are other mystery writers. Susan Wittig Albert has been our guest. Kate Carlisle, who I mentioned, and Reese Bowen, who writes historicals. A few other names that you would know too. They aren't all cozy mystery writers, but most of them are. Nice.
Okay, well,
website one more time, Mystery Lovers.
mysteryloverskitchen.com.
Okay.
All one word, Mystery Lovers Kitchen.
I have a quick question since we're talking about kitchen and recipes. With your recipes in the books, or maybe even some of your fellow author friends, do you make your recipes
absolutely
on a regular basis, or you test them out and then print them and they go by the wayside? Or
I'm glad you asked that. Every single recipe in my books is much tested in my home kitchen. And I am not a trained cook by any means. I'm a trained eater, but I am not a trained cook. And my husband and I have learned a lot about cooking. We took a trip to France 11 years ago, and then we took another one last January. Some of the last people out of the country who got back in, I think. And we spent that month in France. We came back on fire for food and for cooking. But my culinary training is pretty much limited to watching Julia Child and Jacques Pepin videos, which is not bad training. I can make a really good omelet thanks to Jacques. I did not grow up in a foodie family, so I kind of had to learn myself. And that's part of why the market was so important for me, because I learned so much there. Anyway, some of those recipes, Dawn and I created ourselves. Some I found and adapted. Some we have made for many years. Occasionally, especially with the Spice Shop series, I have had to go find recipes. I was not a big chai drinker, Sandra, but I had a clipping of a chai recipe. I think it came from the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. That's how long ago I found it. And so I started making it and playing with it. It was, their version was not spicy enough for me. So I ended up doubling all the spices, and then I think I tripled the tea. And green tea is a perfectly legitimate tea for chai. There are places in India and Nepal where where chai is made with green tea and not with the more common Assam or Keeman. A couple of the recipes, and I'll mention this because you know Don, he invented. There's one in Crime Rib. It's the recipe that could have been a contender if certain murders hadn't happened. He invented it. It's a grilled filet on a steamed portobello with a huckleberry morel mushroom sauce. He had something kind of like that in California when we were traveling, and he decided he wanted to make it with huckleberries and morels, and it's not sweet at all, even though we use Eva Gates jam as part of the base of it, or regular huckleberries, depending on what we have. That's a joke between Sandra and me because that is a well-known jam and preserves place here in Big Fork. But so I have to go looking sometimes for the recipes that feature the spice. So for example, for killing time, that lemon thyme shortbread, which is really good, I had to go find it. I just started looking for recipes that featured thyme because I knew I needed a few in the book. But every one of them, I stand behind it and in front of a plate of it. Obviously, cozies include some humor too, right?
Yep.
So I will tell you one last spice tidbit. It is my favorite spice discovery since I have been writing the Spice Shop series, and that is smoked paprika. If you have not yet discovered smoked paprika, get some, try it. Paprika is wonderful because it gives you the flavor of pepper without necessarily all the heat. Some people like the heat, some people don't. I'm always about the flavor, although heat's fine for me, but paprika has that peppery flavor without setting your mouth on fire. There's sweet paprika, there's Hungarian paprika, and they're both essential to a well-stocked spice cabinet. But smoked paprika has this flavor that it's like you've been served something that was cooked over an open fire in Hungary or paella in Spain. It's great on baked with goat cheese, as Edgar bakes it in Chai Another Day. And it's great in eggs and potatoes, and that is your spice tidbit for the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me come join you tonight. And Peggy, thank you for joining us from all the way from Seattle. Carmen and Brianna, thanks for the invitation and the technical help. And it's just been a delight to visit with you across the miles.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great. And thanks everybody for attending on this cold, well, I guess it's not winter yet, but fall evening.
Spice up your fall.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all
Cheers.
so much. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, Leslie. Appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, there, that was fun. Thank you.
It was. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. I'm going to stop the recording here.